Did you know that modern construction sites are extremely dangerous places? Take a look at these videos. This is what can happen due to mistakes when working with modern construction equipment. It can catch fire, break down, stop responding to its driver, and create many other unpleasant situations. In short, being inattentive and working with heavy construction equipment are incompatible. Today, I will tell you about 7 instances where negligence and foolishness of equipment operators led to devastating accidents or simply bizarre incidents. Get ready to witness a parade of destructive absurdity. We're starting. Take a look at this video. In it, you can see a huge crane slowly tilting to the side, which shouldn't happen, and the outcome is obvious. The crane crashed to the ground with tremendous force, enveloping everything around in a cloud of dust. I really hope the driver of this crane managed to exit the cabin, because if he was still inside, his chances of survival are slim. Unfortunately, the video author does not explain why the accident with this crane occurred. But I can make a couple of assumptions about it. One of the most common causes of such accidents is overloading. Cranes, like any other machinery, have a maximum load capacity. But sometimes operators either miscalculate or intentionally exceed the permissible weight. As a result, the crane loses balance and tips over. Another reason is the improper setup of the crane. If the machinery is set up on an uneven surface or unstable ground, its center of gravity can shift, especially when working with heavy loads. In such cases, even a slight tilt can lead to a tragedy. We also must not forget about equipment wear and tear. Cables, hydraulics, rotating mechanisms. All of this eventually breaks down over time. If the machinery is not serviced on time, the risk of an accident increases significantly. And of course, the human factor. Operator errors, inattentiveness, haste. All of this can lead to tragic consequences. Sometimes crane operators do not receive proper training or ignore safety rules. The outcome is predictable. Such negligence can cost not only their lives, but also those around them. Working with heavy loads requires special skill from specialists. In this video, you can see what insufficient worker qualification leads to. The footage shows how 2 cranes mounted on trucks are lifting a water tower. Everything was going well, but at one point it turned out that the load was poorly secured. As a result, one of the hooks comes undone. This is exactly where the domino effect begins. As soon as the tower loses one point of support, the entire load is instantly redistributed to the remaining crane. The problem is that such structures are not designed for sudden changes in load. Instead of a smooth lift, a sudden jerk begins, and this is a death sentence for the entire system. Physics works mercilessly here. Gravity pulls the tower down, creating a huge torque that jerks the second crane towards the fall. And a crane is not a feather. It has enormous mass, and once it starts moving, stopping it is practically impossible. As a result, the second crane cannot withstand the load and breaks. Its boom bends, and it topples over, dragging the truck with it. The outcome: complete chaos. A crushed building, an overturned crane, an overturned truck. But worst of all, such accidents are not just material damage. They pose a real threat to human lives. If someone ends up in the path of the falling structure, they have virtually no chance. I really hope that the cargo securing specialists will be sent for further training, because such mistakes are not just negligence. This is playing with lives. In this video, the excavator also found itself in an unpleasant situation, having fallen through on its right side. An excavated pit. It seems like a difficult situation, but not hopeless. With the operator's proper reaction, it might have been possible to try to save it. But what is most striking are the actions of the excavator operator himself. Instead of turning the machine around and, by bracing the bucket against the bottom of the pit, trying to push himself out using hydraulics, he simply calmly leaves the cabin. It feels like he isn't particularly concerned about it. As if he's leaving the machine in a parking lot, not in an emergency situation. I can quite imagine that simple panic or lack of experience might have played a role here. An important point. The excavator falls to the right side. Why does this matter? The thing is, on the right side of most such machines, there's only the undercarriage, whereas on the left, there's the cabin. If the machine had fallen to the left, the operator would have had significant problems. This time, he was clearly lucky. Next, we see the rescue operation. Another large piece of construction equipment is used to try to pull out the ill-fated excavator. At this stage, there were no incidents. It could have ended much worse, but this time the damage was minimal. The excavator sustained minor damage, and the operator remained unharmed. However, not all such stories end successfully. And the next case is a vivid confirmation of that. At first glance, there's nothing unusual in this video. A small excavator is digging a pit and loading soil into a Kamaz dump truck. A typical work process, nothing remarkable. But if you look closely, it becomes clear. The situation is developing according to a very dangerous scenario. The subsequent events are astonishing in their absurdity, all because the workers completely ignored basic safety rules. Let's start with the fact that the pit is quite deep. And now let's remember how much a Kamaz weighs. When empty, it weighs about 15 American tons. If its bed is fully loaded, the weight increases to 22 to 25 tons. And here's the key point. This heavy truck is right on the edge of the pit. You would think the driver should understand that the ground beneath him isn't concrete. The soil is loose, and under such weight, it can settle or simply collapse. But he doesn't seem to think about that. When the dump truck was fully loaded and its mass reached its maximum, the inevitable happens. The driver steps on the gas to drive away, but this small jolt becomes the last straw. The edge of the pit collapses under the weight of the Kamaz. The truck instantly loses its footing and crashes into the pit with a thud. From a physics standpoint, everything here is logical. The soil has a certain strength limit, and if the load exceeds this limit, a collapse occurs. Moreover, the dump truck has a high center of gravity, so when its front wheels lose support, the balance is disrupted, and it inevitably overturns. What happened to the driver is unknown, as the video cuts off, leaving us in the dark. I hope he only got a slight scare, because such mistakes sometimes end much more tragically. Well, to avoid such ridiculous and dangerous situations on construction sites, it's important to carefully select personnel and work exclusively with professionals. If you are concerned about finding reliable specialists in the construction field, I suggest reaching out to a production association. The system is a leading enterprise offering a full range of services from designing modular buildings for various purposes, and any level of complexity to development. Design projects, including interior finishing. These guys guarantee the quality of their work, which is very important in our time. Let's watch the next video. It's obvious that construction is underway in this area, which means heavy machinery is at work here. In the footage, we see a truck moving behind a small excavator. The situation seems ordinary, but there's something strange. The truck and the excavator are connected by some kind of white wire. It doesn't look like a towing cable, right? And the difference in the weight of the machinery suggests that the excavator is unlikely to be able to pull the truck if needed. Then why connect them with a wire? Perhaps it was used to transfer electricity, for example, to power the truck starter if its battery was dead. But the biggest mistake is yet to come. The truck is moving uphill, but suddenly its engine stalls, and this is where relentless physics comes into play. As soon as the traction is lost, the multi-ton machine starts moving backward under its own weight and the force of gravity. It would be logical to assume that the driver should have pressed the brake or engaged the handbrake. But even if he tried to do so, it might not have had any effect. The ground under the wheels, judging by the video, is slippery and unstable. The wheels simply couldn't grip the surface. Now, in a desperate attempt to save the situation, the driver tries to restart the engine while moving. But inertia has already taken over. The truck accelerates and, unable to stop, goes off the shoulder, overturning. How could this situation have been avoided? Firstly, before climbing the slope, the driver should have checked the vehicle's technical condition, especially the brakes. Secondly, in such conditions, it is often used. Wheel chocks are used, special wedges that are placed under the wheels in case of an emergency stop. And of course, if the ground is unstable, it's worth reinforcing the road first before allowing heavy machinery on it. Unfortunately, none of this was done here. The outcome is predictable. An overturned truck, damaged equipment, but hopefully an unharmed driver. The next video is more perplexing than horrifying. In front of us is an already overturned truck, lying on its right side. Apparently, it was recently overturned by an inexperienced driver. With the help of special equipment, which remains off-screen, the vehicle is successfully returned to its normal position. It would seem that the operation is complete and the equipment is saved. But no. The real comedy, or rather tragicomedy, begins right after this. As soon as the truck is back on its wheels, it immediately starts moving. Why? Well, because no one bothered to secure it in place. No wheel chocks, not even a simple hold by the equipment. Absolutely nothing. The vehicle is on an uneven surface, and as soon as its center of gravity shifts, it comes into play. The force of gravity. Under its own weight, the multi-ton truck begins to roll slowly but surely. Downhill. You can see the driver desperately trying to jump into the cab to do something. Maybe he wants to apply the brake, turn the wheel, or perhaps just grab his belongings. before the truck went into free fall again, but it's already too late. The giant machine picks up speed, ignoring all attempts to stop it, and confidently heads straight off the roadside. What mistakes were made? First, before setting the truck on its wheels, the surface should have been prepared in advance and reliable chocks placed under the wheels. Even ordinary wooden beams could have provided a few precious seconds to react. Secondly, in addition to the equipment that lifted the truck, equipment should have been used to hold it in place. And of course, the driver should have been ready to take control immediately, rather than trying to jump into the cab on the move. But, alas, none of this was done. As a result, the truck that was just rescued from one accident immediately ends up in another. All efforts wasted, and someone is clearly going to get an unforgettable lesson, and a hefty fine from the management. Let's look at another epic case of a rescue operation conducted in violation of all possible safety standards. This time, the hero rescuer is an excavator, and the victim is an overturned dump truck. What could possibly go wrong here? Yes, absolutely everything. The workers decided not to bother with a professional evacuation and entrusted the operation to the excavator operator, who approached the task in the most unconventional way. Instead of using lifting equipment, or at least securing the vehicle with cables, he simply flipped the dump truck with the bucket. Yes, exactly like that. He just pushed the multi-ton truck as if it were a toy car. They probably thought it would be faster and cheaper, but as you might guess, everything went off plan. As soon as the dump truck got on its wheels, it immediately started moving. And it didn't just roll, it confidently headed down the slope. This is where it gets truly scary. There are parked cars at the bottom. And it's quite possible that there are people sitting in them, unlikely expecting something to suddenly fall on them from above. An uncontrollable multi-ton machine. The excavator operator clearly realized that things were taking a dangerous turn and tried to stop the truck right on the move. The bucket came into play. He tried to press the dump truck to the ground, like they do in movies with fugitives. But alas, the cinematic trick has no place here to stop the enormous. Stopping the speeding truck with just one bucket turned out to be an impossible task. Then comes the climax. The dump truck relentlessly rushes downhill, and the video abruptly cuts off, leaving us only to guess what happened in the end. Perhaps the video operator just dashed to save their machine, realizing it was about to turn into a heap of scrap metal. How could this madness have been avoided? Firstly, the dump truck should have been secured, before the rollover, at least with cables, to prevent it from moving on its own. Secondly, it would have been more logical to use more suitable equipment for lifting, such as a crane. And of course, before overturning such a massive machine, it would have been wise to check where it might roll off to. But, as we can see, common sense is a rare guest on some construction sites. The result: another accident, a pile of losses, a severely damaged machine, or even a life. In this video, I showed you many cases where ridiculous and foolish mistakes were made. But in life, it often happens that even the best drivers can make the most ridiculous mistakes. No one is immune to mistakes. Sometimes mistakes are made due to simple carelessness, sometimes due to the desire to save time, and sometimes because of outright negligence. But the result is always the same: damaged equipment, ruined construction, and in the worst cases, a threat to human life. Construction equipment is not just big toys. Every mistake at the wheel of an excavator, crane, or dump truck can turn into a catastrophe. One miscalculation, one forgotten precaution, and a multi-ton machine is already flying into a ditch, demolishing a building, or knocking everything down in its path. The conclusion is that attentiveness and adherence to safety protocols are not just boring rules from a textbook, but a real guarantee that you'll return home at the end of your shift. It's foolish to think that just because you've been working with machinery for a long time, you can relax. Most accidents happen precisely because of overconfidence. So, if you work on a construction site, don't become the hero of our next episode. Make sure your equipment is in good working order, that it is on a stable surface, that the load is well secured, and that the path of movement is safe. And if you just enjoy watching such videos, well, stay with us. I'm sure I have much more, with which I can surprise you.